Hello, welcome to Oceanic Oracle. My name is Ari and today I'm going through my February wrap-up. It has been quite a short month. I have been a bit sick, at least for the past week. Still don't know what I had. I am still a little bit sick, so if you hear me sounding a bit hoarse, that is why. But the time has come for me to film my wrap-up so I can move on and play my March round, which I'm really looking forward to. My birthday's in March. I love March. That's what I'm going to be doing today. I have my handy dandy reading journal here with all of my thoughts on the books that I have read. First, I guess when I talk about the book, I'm going to be showing you what card it was for, talking about my ratings and my general feelings. So stick around if you're interested. I will also be filming my March TBR as well right after this. I'm not going to bother changing. I don't have the energy for that right now, so you're going to see me in the same outfit. But now, without further ado, let's get on with the wrap up. So the first book I read in February was Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. This was for Courage Don't Desert Me. My prompt for this was to read a book featuring a magical weapon. The way I interpreted that was the Prince of Hearts Jack's ability, using his kisses as well as I found out, Evangelina's kisses as magical weapons, so they fit quite nicely. I enjoyed this book. I'm just saying that this is a 3.5 star, like 3.25 star. For me personally, I am actually interested in seeing where this goes. The book was very easy to read. It was like really fast paced, which I absolutely loved. It's a story of heartbreak. As you can see by the title. I didn't know what to expect because I have not read the Caraval series and I'm actually interested in it now. Although Evangeline in this book is 17, I feel like it definitely leans towards like younger YA, but not that that's a bad thing. I just feel like in the mood I was in at the beginning of the month, I didn't need younger YA. So this is a book about heartbreak, and our main character, Evangeline, is in the middle of it. Her true love is marrying her stepsister. She doesn't know how or why this happened, and she thinks she finds a way to stop it. She goes and consults the Prince of Hearts, otherwise known as Jax. I'm sure that's a big name if you've actually read the Caraval series. I have seen some people talk about it as if he's a big character. Once she contacts him to try and solve her problems just multiply. So like, the main premise of the story, the blurb and everything that everyone's talked about happens in the first chapter. This is a story for younger YA readers, but that doesn't take away my enjoyment of it. I know I'm not the target market for YA now. So I think anyone who's sort of getting into YA fiction, like moving from middle grade to YA, I think they'll absolutely love this. I think if you're looking for an easy book to read, it's perfect. I really enjoyed the atmosphere. It was very like winter wonderlandy. If you know what I'm talking, like if you know the world, you'll probably know where they end up going just based on that. I also really liked Jax as a character. I felt like he was like, it's not in the same way that like people like romanticize villains. I think he was very in depth and he was very well thought out. His motivations were convincing. Evangeline at time could be a bit like, I could be a bit annoyed with her, but I mean, that's the point of a protagonist. A protagonist has flaws. And just because I could see certain things that were going to happen doesn't mean she was going to see things that were going to happen. It makes me want to pick up the next one in the series, so I might do that when that comes out. I'm looking forward to that. I'm interested in seeing what Stephanie Garber is writes. She has blurbed quite a few of my my books, like the books that I've been buying this year, so I'm looking forward to seeing what she does. I like her writing, so I'm looking forward to seeing where this goes. Just because it's a 3-star doesn't mean it's bad. The next book that I read in February was The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime. This is by Mark Haddon. This book centers around a boy who is neurodivergent. This book is extremely emotional. It takes you on a roller coaster. Like, there are things that happen in here that, as someone who is not autistic, it is an extremely reflective piece, and I think it's really important that we read it. I gave this book 4 stars. My sister recommended this to me and I have a lot to thank her for. Like she loved the play, and because she loved the play, she went out and read this book and she recommended it to me, and I'm highly grateful for that. Like I'm extremely grateful for that, because this book provides an insight into like the way other people view neurodivergency. And yes, this book focuses on autism. The main thing is that this is the way society treats people who think differently, who don't act the way that everyone thinks that you're supposed to. I have been pretty like open on my channel. I am dyslexic. I don't have a severe case of dyslexia, but I am dyslexic. I can read something and I can be keeping up with people, but when I'm asked to actually stand up and read off that paper, I can't do that, because my brain I start speaking gibberish, because it doesn't it just doesn't make sense to people. Like the way that dyslexia, so I'm sorry, I'm talking from my lived experience. Like dyslexia affects 1 in 5 people. And I can say about like Percy Jackson series, it really helped me with coming to terms that I'm not alone. It still affects me, and when I was struggling, I didn't feel understood. Like I didn't feel like people knew why I was struggling. On this aspect, I can relate to the main character. Our main character in this book, he sees the world in a way that neurotypical people don't. Like people who don't have autism don't see the world like this. The book discusses the flaws in our current systems. It's a story about how neurodivergent people are forced to fit into a neurotypical world when that shouldn't be the case. And it shows how neurotypical people can act towards people who are on the spectrum, who are neurodivergent. And I think that discussion needs to be had in society. As far as I'm aware, from what I've seen online, Mark Haddon does not have autism, and he is not an expert on autism or Asperger's. I think his story, like the story of this book, is so real, and I think it's something that people need to read to be open-minded, because the experiences that the character goes through in this book, it breaks my heart. It's extremely sad. It's an extremely emotional book, and the things that he goes through, it's so disheartening. It illustrates an issue that affects many people across the world, and if you are neurotypical, I think watching the theatrical production or listening to this on an audiobook or reading this book is important, because it offers you a pathway into what people experience. And I think it is extremely important that you read outside of your known spectrum, because if you only read stories about people who are neurotypical, you have a very narrow view of the world, and it takes away your ability to empathize with people. And I think it's extremely important that we all show empathy to others. I think this book is extremely insightful in how autism affects people differently, how mental illness is treated as society, because I think it's a topic that needs to be talked about. This book was really good, and I highly recommend it. The prompt for The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime was neurodivergent / disabled representation, and I think that fit it very well. The next book that I read in February was A Pale View of Hills by Kazuo Ishiguro. This book was for my literary fiction card, which was to read a book classed as literary fiction. I was in the headspace in the beginning of the month. That was interesting. This book was like a really hard book to read. While I was prepared to read about grief, I was unprepared for how many chapters there were, about like how many reflective chapters there were. I should have expected them, because like the way that grief affects people, like obviously, is completely different. grief does not affect everyone the exact same way. I was expecting a book that was primarily focused on like a death and stuff, but it really wasn't. A large proportion of this book takes place in Japan, whereas I thought initially going into it, it was a story about the effects of grief. This book takes place in 2 timelines, is what I should say. There is the present timeline where she is handling like the death of her daughter, and this book also talks about her life before moving to the UK. Atsuko doesn't really go on a journey in this book, not in a journey in like the traditional sense. It's more an emotional journey. It's a really reflective book, and it's sort of like Virginia Woolf, where you have to read it all in one sitting, because I think if I didn't read it in one sitting, it wouldn't make sense. The characters and the atmosphere are very normal, like average, because I think it can be an any person book. Anyone can see themselves in these sort of characters. I think it was an interesting book to read, but I probably won't pick this book up again. I think this is a 3-star book. It's very slow despite how short it is. It's very mysterious, and I think it's a really reflective book. So I was definitely in a very reflective period at the beginning of the month. The next book was a really fun one for me. I wanted to have some fun with this book, and it was very fitting because the next one I read was It Happened One Summer. This is my second 5-star read of 2022. I absolutely love this book. So obviously this is a romance book, contemporary book set in the modern day. It's very light-hearted, and I found it extremely relaxing to read. The trope, I will say, that happens in this book: grumpy sunshine. I love grumpy sunshine. Like, I love grumpy sunshine romances, especially when you can tell the grumpy character is definitely fallen for the sunshine character first and doesn't want to admit it on the inside. Card that this one was for was If Music Be the Food of Love, which was to read any romance. Very fitting. The trope has always been one of my favorites, and I just love it. When I started this book, I wasn't the biggest fan of Piper, who is the main female lead. I found her a bit stuck up. I think that was the point, because Piper, she was adopted into this family where the man made a lot of money. Like, her mother married this man, and he adopted her mother's, like, her and her sister into their family, so they grew up with quite a lot of money. And I think the start of the book, the start of the premise is that we're not supposed to like her because she's seen as like very elite, you know, and she's sort of taken out of everyday life. Her dad is a movie producer, I think. Anyway, so she's grown up in LA, and she has a very different view on life to what everyday people do. But after she got out of LA, I actually liked her more. She definitely grew as a person, and I'm a sucker for some character development. And when she moved out of LA, away from the sort of toxicity of, like, I don't know, it's like having groups of yes men around can really affect you. I'm sure everyone sort of knows, like, someone who surrounds themselves with yes men or yes women or yes people. At first I thought Piper was a bit bratty, but as I learnt more about her and I got to know her a lot more, I could see the sun, I could see the sunshine. And then the grumpy character turned up. The grumpy character's name is Brendan. He is what every grumpy boy wishes they could be in a man. He is a brooding guy who doesn't take from anyone. He's also, I found him extremely attractive. I really enjoyed the story. I loved the character development. I felt like the character development was extremely realistic, and I loved the setting. What can I say? I'm a sucker for sort of like maritime settings. Like, I'm a marine biologist. What do you expect from me? Smut in this book, top notch. And I am really excited because I ordered the sequel to this. I ordered the sequel for this for my birthday, and it is on the way. Not that it's going to get here for my birthday. My birthday's next week. I think if you're into sort of grumpy sunshine romances, if you're into sort of like brats, like city brats being like learning more about themselves and learning to become independent people, I think this book, it will be good for you. And if you like smut in your books, I'm sure you'll like this. Like, Tessa Bailey does not miss. Definitely female gaze. The next book was a big one. I was so excited, and this book did not disappoint. Our Violin Ends by Chloe Gong. I love this book. This third 5-star read of the year. I sort of expected that going in. I absolutely love Chloe Gong's writing. This is the final book in a duology, so I don't really want to. I'm not going to go into it. I will say 5 stars. The character development was continued and upheld. I felt like it was very true to the characters and their belief systems, like that are already established in the first book. This book sees the return of a supernatural being. It follows the Romeo and Juliet plotline, I guess. But also the ending is really ambiguous. Like, I don't know for sure if what actually happened. Because characters in the books are unsure if what actually happened. And I'm looking forward to reading Foul Lady Fortune when that comes out later this year, because I need to know. I think the character development is stunning. I love Chloe Gong's portrayal of Shanghai. It's just absolutely stunning. This book was adventurous, it was dark, it was emotional, it was exactly what I needed. If you're interested in reading historical fiction set in China, in a time period that I'm sure most of the West doesn't actually talk about very much, you should definitely pick it up. This is fantastic. Like, pick up the first book first to see if you like it, but this book is fantastic. This book is definitely more of a mix of character development as well as plot, whereas I have spoken to a few people in the past. The first book, lots of people feel like is much more based on plot. Like, plot is extremely important. I think the way that the characters are developed and the way that they are portrayed is fantastic. This is coming from a character reader. I love this book. What makes this book even better is that this book is very fast paced. Like, I didn't want to put it down. Let's just say that. Like, I didn't want to put it down. I'm happy and sad because this is over, but it also means I can go and reread. I can reread the series if when I want, and I can actually continue, like, I can read them continuously. Like, my other book is in the UK, but you get the idea. That one was for my anticipated read list, so that card was definitely fulfilled. The next book that I read for this month was Red, White and Royal Blue, and as you can see, I annotated it as I said I was going to do. I started the book before I got ill and I finished it right as I got sick. So Red, White and Royal Blue was for this card, which was LGBT representation, or LGBTQIA plus representation. Definitely fits. This is one of my favorites, like, I guess my favorite stories in general. It's got so much joy in it. As you can see, there's my annotation scheme, and I definitely annotated it to Kingdom Come. This book is a medium paced book. It is obviously LGBTQIA plus. It is a contemporary book. It is a romance book. It's so funny, it's really lighthearted. There are times when it isn't lighthearted. Like, there are things that happen in here that happen, like, these actions happen to the characters, so I'm feeling what the characters are feeling. It just works. Casey McQuiston's writing, like, their writing, fantastic. If you are interested in reading queer literature, you should definitely, at least if you're looking for a place to start and you don't mind reading about smut, Casey McQuiston is a good place to start. This was their debut novel, Red, White and Royal Blue, and this is their latest one. They also have another book coming out, so this is a Achillean romance and this is a sapphic romance, so they have romances for people. Both of the main characters, so both characters in these books whose story is told, are bi. I really enjoyed their books. I think Casey McQuiston's writing, top notch. The banter that happens between Alex and Henry is great. Also, like, hate to love. I love hate to love in books. I love the hate to friends to lovers because it shows emotional growth. I think it's a book that people should pick up. I think it's important to read books about joy, and I think it's extremely important for people to, like, who do identify as LGBTQIA plus, to read happy stories about them. I think it's really important to read books about joy, and I think that's what one of the things that we need to do as readers, and I think it's one of the things that people need to talk about more in this space, particularly from people who are a part of the LGBT community, because it isn't like, it shouldn't be standard that their stories all end in sadness. That should not be the norm. You should have books about joy. You should have books that do contain tragedy. It's important to have that balance. And I think more people in this space need to recommend books with happy endings. It's important to read happy endings, and I think people who aren't in the community need to actually go out and read stuff, because again, it's about developing empathy for other people. If the smart makes you uncomfortable, skip ahead. Very simple. You don't have to read the smart if you don't want to. It's your book. Who's going to stop you? Anyway, I think this is a great book if you're talking about like learning stuff about yourself and discovering that there's more to you than meets the eye than even you actually put time into and thought about. I think it's fantastic and I highly recommend it. Go and pick up Chef's Kiss and everything. Go and read it. And the last book that I read this month is Fire Falling by Elise Cover. I gave this book, I think I gave it 4 stars. Solid book. I gave 4 stars to the first book too. This book focuses on elemental magic. This whole story is a 5-part story. I mean, it's elemental magic because the card that I picked this month was the Wind It's Calling, and it's to read a book with elemental magic, and this book fit. It fit very well. So this book is only it's nearly 400 pages, but it still felt really fast. I think from what I've seen online and on Storygraph, which is what I mostly use now to track my books, it's classed as very fast paced. Like the first 2 books are very fast paced, and then it gradually gets slower as the series progresses. There are 5 books in the series. I read this one, and I am actually interested in starting the 3rd one. I have actually started it, but I have been ill and I cannot remember what actually happened. So I'm going to actually restart that when I'm 100% better, because I actually want to focus and read. This series is really interesting. The first book definitely gave me the whole Chosen One vibes, which is fair because that's what it's there for. This book actually moved it along a lot more, and I saw a lot more development, not only of our main character, but also of the people around her and in her love interest, because this is sort of classed as a fantasy romance series. I think the romance works. The plot to it, what happened at the end of this book, made me want to go out and pick up the next one immediately. I'm finding it harder to give out 5 stars now for certain fantasy books. I think there are things that I learned that I like now as an adult that if I read this when I was 16, 17, I probably would have given it 5 stars in my opinion. But I think I've actually developed a taste, and it's hard to describe. I think I've managed to narrow down what I actually feel about books. And I think this book, while I love the concept, I think I need to be taken on an even bigger journey. There's something about it that didn't meet my high, what I set it up for, and that's my fault. I really enjoy the story. I think the characters are good. There are times where I get frustrated, but that's because I'm an adult, almost a fully fledged adult. I'm not 25 yet, but it's important to recognize that in yourself and not let that take away from the reading experience. I think the writing in these books is great. I read Elise Cover's newest release in September last year, and I really enjoyed that. I gave that 4 stars. Didn't take anything else away from it. I can just tell when something's going to be 5 stars and when it's not, and there's nothing bad about it. It was a good book. I was relatively intrigued. I wasn't completely hooked. I think I'm finding that certain books need to up that intrigue factor. I used to be very liberal with my intrigue. I used to be ooh, okay, let me just read this all the time. No, but now I do have other things to do in life, and I can't just sit and read a book for hours, which is fair because that is life as an adult. There are times where I am extremely intrigued and I don't want to put a book down, and I mean, I've just talked about are Violin Ends. That book was one of them. Other books, I can put them down and I can come back and I can't, and it'll be like, meh, doesn't matter. Like, I still know the story, but I just wasn't as invested. I read for enjoyment, and if I don't enjoy a book, like if it's not in the like higher end of the enjoyment factor, like what was the point in forcing myself to read it? Those are all the books that I read in February. This is my last week of being 23. Yes, my birthday is in the beginning of March. While I've been sick, I've been rewatching The Flash, so that's what I will be doing instead. I hope you've enjoyed seeing what I read and my thoughts on them, however rambly they may be. Give me some grace because I have been, and I am still ill, so I'm not 100% better. I am going to go straight in and film my March TBR because I am taking part in there are a few readathons that are happening in March, and I need to sort my TBR out for them. There are certain books that I need to read, and I have no idea how anything's actually going to fit in to these prompts. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe if you want more bookish content. Be sure to come back for my March TBR. This is my 4th video in my 2022 TBR game playlist, so be sure to check out the rest of it if you're looking for an introduction to my TBR game. I'll be linked in the eye up here, so go and check out the playlist. I hope you have a wonderful day or night, depending on when you're watching this. I hope you stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye guys.